Welcome, hungry friends. Today I am making a low carb meal because a lot of what I've eaten lately is pasta, pasta, pasta. This is a vegetarian version of Tater Tot Casserole, which I learned how to make from my ex-husband, and I don't know where he got the original recipe, but the one I'm using is a version of that. Typically, you will brown a pound of ground beef. I've used ground turkey for many years, um, but this in order to be vegetarian, and also I need it to be low cholesterol too. In order to do that, I decided to substitute mushrooms. I have substituted a can of brown lentils in the past, and that was fine, but I had these mushrooms from a friend of mine and didn't know what else to do with them. And I've never tried mushrooms in this recipe, so I wanted to give it a try. I also decided to dice up a quarter of an onion. I had a really big onion, so you may want to do a half. I don't actually use onion in the original recipe, so you don't need it, but I decided to just throw it in there because onions do add a lot of flavor to food, and if you're ever like wanting to kick up something and there's no onions in it or no salt in it, just add those things. So I'm gonna chop up the mushrooms into like little tiny pieces. You can slice these if you prefer. I think I wanted the pieces to be small because I wanted it to feel like ground beef, which was the original meat in this recipe. The original version of this recipe calls for a pound of ground beef or ground turkey and 40 to 50 frozen tater tots. I think I wrote that number in myself because I don't like to fill the entire surface with tater tots, but that is what you're technically supposed to do. Just line up tater tots along, like in a row, in the baking pan. You can use sweet potato tots that are frozen if you want them. I don't usually buy those because they're fried and I have really high cholesterol, so this is my way of getting a lower cholesterol and a low carb version of this recipe. You can make it with cubed regular old russet potatoes or Idaho potatoes, or as in the case I'm doing, cubed regular old sweet potatoes. So I've got the diced onions and the chopped mushrooms, and like I mentioned before, the onions aren't really part of this recipe. If you're using ground beef or ground turkey, you'll start right here. Just go ahead and add some oil to a pan, throw in your ground beef, and then use one of those ground beef choppers to chop it up until it's browned. Then you'll drain it and you will set it aside until later. It's actually a really fast recipe if you're going ground beef with no onions. Like the whole first, I don't know, 7 minutes wouldn't be part of your recipe if you're doing it the original way. So now I'm going to peel the sweet potatoes. I did use two. I do typically buy two potatoes when I'm doing this without using tater tots. Two Idaho potatoes or two sweet potatoes. And then I don't always peel Idaho potatoes. I sometimes do eat the skin on them, but for some reason with sweet potatoes I don't, and I don't know if that's because I never see them in a restaurant with the skin on, or if you're really not supposed to eat the skin, or people just don't. I shouldn't say not supposed to because I doubt it'll hurt you, but people just don't do it. So peel your sweet potatoes and then go ahead and cube them into little 1-inch chunks if you can, or something close to that size is fine. So I don't know if you can see the inside of the potatoes now, but is this what they're supposed to look like? Because it looks almost wrong. And like I made this like 4 days after buying them, so I didn't expect them to look weird, but they kind of look a little weird. So I mean, they tasted okay, so I don't know what that weird pattern means on the inside of them. So I had my onions cooking for a bit while I was cutting the sweet potatoes, and I decided to also use up this ground beef, which is a soy-based textured vegetable protein sold in the frozen food section. It's basically vegan ground beef. I think that's about a cup of it, but I never measured when I was making any recipes with this ingredient. So I wanted to throw that in there because I thought it would make it taste more like ground beef. And then I'm going ahead and adding extra oil because that stuff absorbs everything. It must be a characteristic of soy. It absorbs everything. Oil, flavor, seasoning, it just does. This is also not in my original recipe, but I'm adding some seasoning to taste. For some reason, when I make this with ground beef or ground turkey, I just like make it plain, like I'm feeding it to an animal. So cumin, garlic powder, paprika, I threw all that in here because, as I said a few seconds ago, soy absorbs flavor like nobody's business. So stir that all up, and then you've got yourself some pretty good tasting fake ground beef. So now I'm going to add the mushrooms and cook that. I didn't mention the heat, but this should be medium or medium high. And then mushrooms will shrink and get darker when they're cooked, so just keep an eye on it and you should be able to tell when it's ready to go. I covered it for a while and let it cook and then sprayed more oil. And it looks like it's done now. I don't know if covering it helps with mushrooms, but I like steaming foods, so I try to cover when I can. So as a reminder, there's onion, textured vegetable protein, which is vegan ground beef, and mushrooms in this. You can do pretty much any combination of textured vegetable protein, mushroom, lentils, if you want this to be vegan. Now, I'm adding probably, I don't know how much that is. We're going to just say a can's worth of frozen corn because I had frozen corn, but you would really want to use a can of frozen corn, drain it, throw it in the bowl, and then take a can of green beans, drain that, throw it in the bowl, and then throw in a can of cream of mushroom soup. And this is the only ingredient keeping this recipe from being vegan. I know there are recipes for vegan cream of such and such soup. You actually don't even need the mushrooms if you're, even if you aren't making it with mushrooms, you don't need the mushrooms. It doesn't taste like anything. All this freaking cream of mushroom soup does is like hold the stuff together so it doesn't, I don't know, fall over. Which, like, is it a bicycle with a broken kickstand? I don't know. It's a binding agent, I think. So if there is another vegan binding agent that you use, not something for baked goods, something for savory dinner foods, let me know what it is, and if it's not crazy expensive or hard to come by, I might pick it up and go ahead and use it myself in a recipe like this, because that's kind of all cream of whatever soup does in any of my recipes. It just kind of binds things together. Now I'm throwing some seasoning in there. I'm using my favorite Creole seasoning. It's actually not my favorite Creole seasoning. My favorite is probably called Slap Ya Mama. I'm pretty sure it's made from a company in Ville Platte, Louisiana. I might be wrong on the city. Mix everything up in a bowl. Then add your mushroom, lentil, TVP, whatever you used to substitute your ground beef. Or your ground beef, you're allowed to eat meat, honestly, it doesn't matter to me. Throw that all together and mix it up. Then spray a 9x13 pan with a nonstick spray of your choice. Then pour all that stuff into the pan and kind of level it out. My arm is blocking a lot of it. Actually, the bowl was blocking a lot of it, so I cut out some there. But yeah, spread it all out. You know what that would look like. Now we're going to add some oil to the potatoes. I normally use olive oil, but I was almost out and didn't want to have to go to the store anytime soon. So this is canola oil. Just pour a little bit of it on there and then mix it up so that it coats all the pieces. And usually if I use my hands, it coats everything pretty well. My hand is like super oily afterwards though. But go ahead and coat the potatoes. If you want to add some seasoning to the potatoes, salt and pepper would be just fine. I typically prefer to add my Cajun spices because it makes everything taste better. Once the potatoes are seasoned, put them over the other ingredients in the pan. You should be trying to sort of spread it out so it's nice and even. And if you have something like tater tots that are factory shaped, I should say, then you can probably space them pretty evenly and make a fun pattern or whatever. So I asked the internet and it said to make these at 450 for 15 minutes, which is, I believe, also the same instructions as a package of tater tots. If you're using manufactured tater tots, just follow the directions on the back of the bag for approximately however many tater tots you already put on the top, because the rest of the food is still cooked. And I don't know if you caught that, but the taters were not cooked all the way. It was really hard, crunchy, sweet potatoes, so I decided to throw them back in the oven for another 15 minutes, doubling cooking time. And I'm not sure if you can tell if they got slightly darker. They don't look that much different to me, but they weren't quite ready, so I put them 4 minutes again in the oven. It looks like the taters got a little bit charred, so that's good. That means they cooked all the way. So I'm trying to get a piece of mushroom and a piece of sweet potato. I should have made it 475 instead. And this time, it was cooked all the way and delicious. I hope you enjoyed this delicious low-carb, low-cholesterol recipe. Happy eating!